The vice presidential debate with JD Vance, Tim Walz answering questions, clarifying policy goals, and occasionally seeing eye to eye while also delivering subtle attacks on Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. The question is, who won? Our exclusive WFLA.com poll is live. You can go to WFLA.com/poll to vote as we break down the results here with WFLA political analyst Tara Newsom. I'm JB Biunno. Welcome into your local election headquarters. We just watched for more than 90 minutes Senator JD Vance and Governor Tim Walz break down the issues, go through about roughly dozen or so issues presented by CBS News and the moderators. Of course, a very different tenor in this debate, I think we can say, versus the presidential debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. Tara, let's just get into the initial thoughts here as we look at the poll results that are going to be populating here on our screen. What did you think?
You know, there's a golden rule for vice presidential debates, and that's do no harm. The candidates really delivered, both of them tonight. And although they did no harm to either Donald Trump or to Kamala Harris, at times they even looked like they were having a bromance with one another, which was, really distinctively different than the presidential debate. But they did paint two distinctive Americas. And I think if you were listening, although they were much more congenial and polite and respectful to one another, the two different Americas really are at the heart of the polarization of our politics. Of course, J.D. Vance was painting a picture in which America has been hijacked by illegal immigration, and that issues around gun violence, housing affordability, healthcare, all were at the cost of having this illegal immigration. Whereas Tim Walz really offered this opportunity economy, this different picture of optimism that Kamala Harris introduced in the Democratic National Convention. So those two different narrated Americas really came through, despite how sort of respectful they were to each other. You certainly did pick up the barbs. And I think Americans, when they were really listening, were really seeing a much different vision of what the next 4 years could look like.
We're going to break down some of the interesting moments, some of the issues that caught Tara's attention and mine. We want to let you know that right now our poll is live on WFLA.com/poll. We've got a lot of folks joining us on Facebook Live, YouTube Live that are just shouting JD or Tim in the comment section. I see those comments coming in, but there's no way for us to quantify them. The only way to quantify them is to go to WFLA.com/poll. I know that sounds like I'm pushing you in that direction, but quite frankly, we're telling you it is a no sign up, no login required. It is a one-tap poll. I can guarantee you that we're just trying to get an idea as to who you thought won by getting as many votes as possible. If we put it behind, a login requirement or a sign-in requirement, we wouldn't get as many votes as we do. We're simply trying to get as many votes as possible. So head over to WFLA.com/poll to vote. You can also click on the link in the description on this video. So we're seeing the results come in here live. There were a lot of issues. Let's go through the Middle East. Of course, talking about the recent impact of Hurricane Helene and climate change. Immigration and deportation was discussed. The economy. An interesting question in the middle there I thought was very interesting from CBS News about personal qualifications for the office of vice president. Abortion and reproductive rights probably is the one that's going to receive the most attention. I think I wasn't counting minutes, Tara. I think that one might have received the most minutes, right in the heart of the debate. Firearms and the Second Amendment were brought up, inflation, housing, the economy. I mean, CBS News did a really good job keeping things moving along.
They did. They even hit upon, Family Leave Act for newborns, child care affordability, all of the sort of nuanced issues that are kitchen table issues that Americans are worried about that actually really lead us to inflation. And that was, of course, a major theme. But let's kind of walk through these, JB, a little bit, because I think it's really interesting how CBS laid out and set the table for the debate tonight. And really starting with the Israeli conflict was really an interesting way to open the debate. I think it really showed, at first I thought, a strength of J.D. Vance, who was able to be commanding in that moment. And you kind of saw Tim Walz kind of shaky in his intro. But then they really did start to unravel their policy differences. And one of the good things that came out of this debate, as far as I'm concerned, is you really saw more depth of policy and approach from both sides of the ticket. And I think that was very helpful. But the perspective of each of the candidates regarding the culpability of what's happening in the Middle East right now really is fundamental to how people are really so far apart. J.D. Vance, of course, lays the blame on Joe Biden and his administration and Kamala Harris, to be quite frank, but he didn't really square up how the vice president could really have a big impact, because we know constitutionally that the vice president only has two real roles, right? One, to preside over the U.S. Senate, and of course, one to be a tie breaking in the U.S. Senate, and then of course to take over the role of the presidency if the president is no longer able to serve. And so, of course, Kamala Harris can't really impact that. She's, of course, part of a team. And it would have been interesting to see Tim Walz turn to him and say, well, when you're vice president for Donald Trump, do you think you're going to have a seat at the big boy table? But of course, he didn't do that. And Tim Walz did the predictable thing of laying the blame on Donald Trump's presidency 4 years ago. So that really, that was sort of interesting to watch, the commanding presence of Vance and Walz sort of start to relax under pressure. But it really was when we started to move into the next topic. And the next topic, wasn't it the hurricane, JB, and climate change? And that really started to show, I think, the level of understanding and holistic approach to how the Harris campaign sees climate change as an integral part of the economy. And it was really interesting to watch J.D. Vance's response to that, which was bring jobs back to America and we'll solve climate change. And, there wasn't much more meat to that. And so I think here in Florida, when we're really reeling from, these monster storms that we just lived through, we really want to see a little bit more about climate change and what those particulars look like. And then, JB, remind me, what was the next issue? I think it was
immigration and the idea of deporting millions of people that have crossed the border illegally.
That's right. Thank you. JB, I don't know. I would love to hear your opinion on this. I thought JD Vance did a masterful job tonight, tying everything back to immigration. And that really, for Republicans, is where they pull the strongest. And he was able to pivot almost every question, whether it be healthcare or whether it be, there were some other pieces, gun violence, violent crime, etc., all came back to that second issue regarding immigration and deportation. But what was not helpful to the American voter was that neither one answered the question about whether children would be separated from parents. And I know both of us are parents. We worry about what that would look like, what that means for us as a character of a country to do those kind of policies. And we didn't really get a clear picture from either one of them. But I certainly give the point to J.D. Vance for being able to tie almost all of his dialogue tonight to that very controversial issue that, of course, Republicans are polling the strongest on.
So, Tara, you know me well enough to know that I'm not going to give my opinion. I'm here to just try my very best to call balls and strikes on the issues. I'll point out some of the things that our commenters have been pointing out. And for those of you that are dropping comments in with your poll vote on WFLA.com/poll, we're going to be bringing your thoughts into the live stream in the coming minutes. So just bear with us, because Tara and I are going to get through some of these key highlights, and then we're going to dive into the commenters that are joining us on stream, by the thousands right now. So we'll get to your comments. We'll get to some of what you thought of the performances tonight from Vance and Walz. I think just generally, by looking at our comment section, people feel that J.D. Vance carried tremendous poise throughout this debate, front to end, and that Tim Walz, as you noted, probably started off a bit shaky and then picked up momentum as the debate carried on. I think it's more than it's going it's not even my opinion. It is. You could point to multiple times in the over the course of the debate, Tara, that yes, that Vance did bring it back to the idea that millions of immigrants have been pouring into our country. Fentanyl was brought in to the conversation multiple times, talking about how drugs have been brought in. The claim that drugs are being flooded, I think was the word that was used. Drugs are flooding our streets here in the United States, coming in from our border to the south. So,
but real fast though, we need to be mindful that a lot of these items, although the QR code was on there to be checked, that we don't have that real time fact checking on our dialogue right now.
Right.
And then I also want to make the point that although I give kudos to JD Vance for tying it to a popular concept, which is immigration is an issue, I don't necessarily think that he won the debate in terms of bringing it back to talking about immigration with dignity.
I'm not saying that he won. I'm just saying that it was clearly a strategy for him.
It was. Yes. We can agree to that.
No. I want to be very clear to you and our audience. Never thought that it was part of a winning strategy. I'm saying that it was part of the strategy overall. It's up for our commenters to point out whether or not Vance or Walz won the debate. I was pointing out just clearly that Walz, based on our commenters, what they have said thus far, and I'm reading in the comments that are coming in on YouTube and Facebook Live, people are just saying that Vance was very calm and composed over the course of the debate, while Walz was more of a slow starter and then picked up momentum as the debate went on.
Absolutely. Now, I do think that what Walz did...
quickly, I'm sorry, a live look here. This is, we just had Senator Vance making his way into the spin room. All the cameras here are following Vance, and there's Donald Trump Jr. You can see him through the thick of the crowd. It looks like Vance is sitting down with one of the networks off into the distance. For those of you unfamiliar, the spin room is, of course, where a lot of supporters of the candidates that are taking the debate stage, and of course the candidates themselves, will enter the spin room, do interviews with various networks, various press agencies, and a lot of rhetoric is bounced back and forth over the course of the debate as to what was fact, what was fiction, who won, who lost. This is a room where it's just going on. A lot is being fired back and forth in real time. It's an absolute circus. I'm sorry, Tara, I cut you off. Let's bring you back.
No, that's okay. I just wanted to make the point that, it depends on what you were listening for tonight. And that goes to my point when we opened up the discussion tonight. If you were looking for JD Vance to try to stick it to the Harris-Walz campaign, you probably have to give him a B+. He was very polite. He made some excellent points. But if you were looking for dignity to be returned to the conversation of democracy, and if you're looking for a fact-based discussion, I think Walz really delivered for Harris on that. He really talked about dignity and immigration, which is part of the American narrated story. He really talked about multilateralism, which is a big part of American foreign policy for the last 50 years. And he really drove home something that I think Americans sometimes get lost in when we're talking about political rhetoric, is that the Biden-Harris presidency did deliver a bipartisan immigration bill, and Walz just beat that drum. And why didn't we solve this problem when we could? Because it became a political football for Donald Trump. So I think if you were looking for, you found in the debate what you were looking for. But if you were looking for dignity to be returned to the discussion about immigration, I think Walz did a really good job. Let's move to the abortion discussion, because I thought that was really interesting. JB, what did you think that, and what are your viewers really thinking about how JD Vance handled that? Because we know that JD Vance, prior to being a vice presidential candidate, had a much different take on reproductive rights that was much broader, much more akin to the Roe v. Wade protections. And then tonight, of course, he is aligned with Donald Trump. What are your viewers saying about how they felt about his handling of the abortion discussion?
Well, I'm going to look for particular comments coming in specifically about reproductive rights, but there are people that are casting their vote on WFLA.com, and then optionally you have an opportunity to give us a comment that we can spotlight on screen, like Gene here. Vance was intelligent and well-spoken and answered The questions.
Well, it was interesting because when it was talking about abortion, I thought that it was tough to actually find the real answer for JD Vance, because when he was asked about a national abortion ban, and he pivoted and said, "We want to give women choices." And it was a strong answer, talking about women having options about families, how they build their families. But he never answered the question about a national abortion ban. And that was a little bit troubling, because people want to know that. That's part of one of the lightning rod issues for people. And I thought one of the takeaways for the Walz campaign, the Harris Walz campaign, was the explicit support that Walz gave. It was almost like ready for a commercial. We trust women, we trust doctors. That can easily be repeated. And so in that issue, I thought Walz was a whole lot clearer on where they stand in terms of abortion, where we were left a little bit scratching our heads. Yes, JD Vance said that he supports women and options, but he didn't necessarily give us a final answer on a national abortion ban. And I think many voters that are watching still want that final answer.
Fleming here is saying they both won. I want to see this kind of civility in
Agreed.
Congress. I think that there are a lot of people in our comment section that feel the same way, that there was moments where they agreed to disagree, and then they disagreed just outright. So I think that's interesting, particularly
There was a time where I thought they were going to lean in and give each other a hug. And I was like,
well, did you see it there at the end, Tara? I don't know if you saw it on CBS News, but they had quite, a lengthy handshake there at the end.
Sure.
Their respective wives, of course, coming over and joining in as well. It looked like a lengthy conversation back and forth. And so that's just...
You know what was great? You know what was great about this? And of course, I teach American government and I teach ethics, and I truly believe that at the heart of American politics is pluralism. And that's the competition of ideas. And we saw both of our vice presidential candidates engage in that. They listened to one another. Let's do that with our neighbors and our family members. It was a great modeling of that. I'm not entirely sure, though, that anybody left this debate thinking that either one of them are ready to take the presidency. And that's important, especially when you consider the age of Donald Trump. So I think we're still left on which one would be ready to take the helm. But in terms of pluralism and modeling, listening, and democratic ideals, that certainly was on the stage tonight. Gun violence was the next issue, JB, that they started to address.
Well, I want to stay on reproductive rights here for a second. Okay. I want to highlight John's comment here. Walz was on target. Vance was dodging questions. I'm going to do my very best, everybody, to show questions comments that are coming in from both sides here. Will says, continue, Tara.
I think to Will's point, or not to Will's point, and I don't know if Will can, I think he's right. There's at least 43 to 46% of America that is aligned with people. But what your previous commenter was talking about was this idea that although JD Vance presented that he was family-centric and that he believed in women having choices, he wasn't clear on whether women would have the choice of reproductive autonomy, which is what we're talking about when we're talking about abortion rights. So that remained murky, that was never answered, and that we're left not quite sure of that national abortion ban. But I got to tell you, if you believe in the federal government and the state government staying out of your bedroom and out of your body, I think Walz did a very good job saying we agree with that, and we believe that we trust women and we trust doctors, and we're very pro women, and that came out very clear.
It was very interesting to hear Vance take almost responsibility on behalf of his party, saying that we need to do better on this issue. It's just not something that I think that we're accustomed to hearing in modern day politics and recent debates and recent election cycles, where we have somebody who is speaking on behalf of their party and saying very openly, we can do better on this issue. While Vance to some in our comment section, we just had a commenter saying that, Devin is saying Vance answered more questions and did so respectfully and directly without going on tangents or making outlandish claims. The previous commenter that we had on screen off of WFLA.com/poll said that Vance was dodging questions. I've seen a lot of claims in our comment section that Vance was dodging questions, but one thing that I thought was interesting was on several different points taking responsibility and saying that we need to either the idea that he was throwing out there was either that the Republican Party needs to do better or that Congress as a whole needs to do better, that bipartisanship in this country needs to be more evolved to get things passed and to get meaningful legislation into the Oval Office. So I think, it's been fascinating, but reproductive rights, Walz was going, mentioning a couple of stories, specific instances. That's a debate tactic that we have seen before, tying it, of course, to an individual story or individual stories. It's going to be interesting to see how this now gets interwoven into the Harris and Trump campaigns and how this supplements those campaigns and the messages that they're getting out. Because, guys, we're approaching the home stretch here. We're coming in
5 weeks to go.
on just
5
5 weeks before Election Day.
JB, let me address what you just said about the pivoting and the strategy that campaigns and that JD Vance had. I thought the same thing that you're speaking to. I caught note that he was sort of explaining the polarization of his own party or the radicalization of the Republicans on abortion rights, saying, hey, we can do better to be more inclusive and making our case to persuade people why we stand the way we do on reproductive rights. The part that was absent from his discussion was the part that Walz did very well on this one issue. And that was the discussion about not just supporting women in their choices, but supporting women with their own autonomy. And that came out clear that, yes, he made this comment that Republicans need to do better in making our case on why our policy is the way it is and changing policies to be supportive once women have children and make families. But that didn't extend to understanding and respecting women's bodily sovereignty. And that might be a bridge for suburban women voters and men who have wives and daughters and sisters and friends, maybe a bridge too far. And, that's what we're going to be watching for, is if that's the one issue that really changes the outcome of this race.
So right now, these numbers are live off of WFLA.com/poll. And then underneath the poll widget, you'll see an area. It's completely optional to drop in a name and a comment, and then we can spotlight some of your observations. Your local election headquarters is about giving you a voice and making sure that we are representing our audience as best as possible. So we're representing comments supporting JD Vance. We're representing comments supporting Tim Walz, and we'll continue to do so over the course of the live stream. AM, just again, if you don't want to put in your name like AM, just put in your initials. You don't have to put your entire name on the comment. We totally respect your privacy. We want to be able to give you a voice. That's the most important thing. Saying that Vance had a lot of good moments. And look, Tara, we talked about this on the last live stream. In 2024, that is so important, having good moments. And I'm sure that each candidate is going to feel like they had some home runs tonight. Having those big moments is crucial because people, in large part, I think it was Walz who made the Dancing with the Stars joke. Look, there are going to be a lot of Americans who didn't watch this debate tonight, who aren't going to ever watch it in its 90-plus minute entirety. They're going to wake up tomorrow on social media, and as they're brushing their teeth or, using the restroom or eating their Frosted Flakes, they're going to be scrolling through Facebook and Instagram and looking at those clips, those little micro moments. And those micro moments can really make a difference in today's political climate with how people consume information. So moments are big. I'm curious to what people thought or had, like, which candidate had the bigger singular moments in the debate.
I think you're right. And I think that's why it goes to the point that we talked about earlier. If you found what you were looking for in this debate, if you were looking for Vance to be tough and direct and tie the Biden-Harris to Tim Walz, especially regarding immigration, you found it. If you were looking for dignity and hope and optimism, you found it. It just was in the Walz presentation. So I don't think that this debate's going to change anybody's mind, but what it certainly did is brought civility back to the politics of the day. And I think that's a much needed break that many of us needed. Let's finally get to this gun violence piece though, because I think this was very interesting.
Can we hold that for 1 second?
Of course,
1 second.
of course,
I just want to spotlight Evan's comment here on screen that says it was a good debate. And I'm just seeing that enough that I just want to pause the brakes here for 1 second and just note that there's actually some tremendous optimism in the comment section from people that are saying that this was a bit of a breath of fresh air from a debate perspective. And yes. I know that you, as a political science, guru, I know that this is right up your alley, that it is going to be refreshing for a lot of Americans to hear a civil discourse. The idea that we had an exchange of ideas that wasn't as much about antics as it was about getting, into the, sort of moments and trying to find out where these two candidates stand on the issues. And those exchanges back and forth were fascinating. So I want to, let's get to gun violence, but I just want to highlight.
Now you brought something up, but I got to get to it now.
All right, we'll pivot back.
Okay, I honestly think that you're 100% right. That Evan is right. The good debate part is what we all, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, you want a competition of ideas. And there's this old saying, you want two healthy parties in order to have the best ideas come to the democracy's marketplace. And that's what we saw tonight. And what we also saw is them listening to one another. That was what was refreshing. You saw both J.D. Vance and Tim Walz lean in and listen and didn't talk over each other and didn't throw names and barbs. And I think that was helpful to the American public to really see that democracy can still work and that we should trust in the system.
It's even more commenters right now are echoing that it was just nice to hear an exchange of ideas. And we'll come back here to the live poll results, because I want to remind our audience, these are live results. As we get just how statistics work, right? The more votes that we get, the more difficult it is to move the needle, because we have so many votes, and to move it, up or down for J.D. Vance, moving it down to 61% or up to 63%, it's going to take dozens of votes at this point to get, we don't have decimal points here. So it's we're waiting to see if there's more movement in favor of Vance or against Vance. You can vote on WFLA.com/poll. These are live results on your screen. But Tara, let's go back to firearms and the Second Amendment. There was a moment of agreement there. That was on no one's bingo card heading into tonight, that these two candidates would have a moment to just take a step back, agree that gun violence and school shootings are just identifying it as evil. I don't think the word evil was used, but they identified it clearly as a problem and said that they disagree on solutions. But there was some optimism in each one of their voices about getting something done, and that, again, was not on anyone's bingo card heading into tonight, that they would see a little bit eye to eye on the Second Amendment.
Actually, I thought that was somewhat masterful that, Walz shared the story about guns and how, he sat down and changed his mind by listening to parents who had experienced the loss of a child in a school shooting. And I think that you could almost see the light turn on in J.D. Vance when that happened. It was almost watching the evolution of J.D. Vance's thinking on guns in schools. But we were offered two different pathways. Clearly, both parties believe in supporting the Second Amendment. But what was so interesting to me is that J.D. Vance offered more school resource officers as a solution, and then of course brought up the driver of gun violence being the mental health crisis in our country. And it was really good of Walz to say, hey, wait a minute, let's not stigmatize mental health. Let's understand that there are drivers to this, but that not everyone who suffers from a mental health issue is someone that's going to be violent or take on gun violence. I thought that was excellent in many ways. I see that your comment,
for people that are just listening, and people might be on the road, sometimes we have people that are just listening, so I'll read it.
You want to go ahead and share it?
Yeah, Hershey Girl says, Walz is obviously less experienced at debating, but he did an excellent job of getting his points across. Vance continued his false claims, although he did make himself look a little nicer, but he lied numerous times during the debate. That's where, fact checking comes in. I'm gonna be honest. I was scanning that QR code that we had mentioned on CBS News, looking for fact checks. They were coming in at such a. Did you look at it?
Yeah, it was delayed. It was just too delayed.
It was just way too behind, because by the time that we had something where we're like, oh, I'm curious to see how CBS News is going to fact check this, they were on to the second, third, or fourth topic beyond that. So,
right.
Yeah.
And I think that the Hershey, was it Hershey Girl?
Hershey Girl.
I think,
no, it's Hershey Girl. Yeah.
Hershey Girl. I think it's just a matter of style. Quite frankly, Tim Walz has had 6 congressional debates and 2 gubernatorial debates under his wings, and JD Vance only has a couple running for U.S. Senate. I think that it just depends on what you were listening for and really how you can evaluate these 2 candidates. But I, again, think with JD Vance, whether you think he offered a good solution or not, he politically and strategically was able to even tie the gun violence to the immigration border issue by saying the reason why we have such gun violence in our country is because we have so many illegal guns. And, as an educator and somebody who deals with the reality of guns coming to campuses, my students, whenever we have this debate on the Second Amendment, always say, it doesn't matter if you have a gun legally or illegally. If somebody wants a gun, they can get it. And I think that question wasn't answered by either of the candidates, which is what's going on in our country, that people are wanting to use guns to solve problems. And it certainly isn't, the answer can't be mental health crisis, all that. It could be one of them, but it's not the only answer. So that was somewhat left unmet, I think, for many voters who are still undecided. Like, what does that really mean?
I have another, shot here. I want to show everybody the spin room. This is live in the spin room. And who's there? Senator J.D. Vance. I'm sure that he's going to be, going back to back to back, hitting a lot of these various networks and supporting his performance tonight. Roger on the WFLA website, after voting for Vance in the poll, said Vance was more articulate and made more sense. That speaks to style that you were talking about earlier, Tara.
Yeah, and I think when we shift to the next issue, which was healthcare, I think that's where, if you're really thinking about policy and not just style, and you remember this has been laid out, debates like this, since the Nixon-Kennedy debate. And by the way, that was the last debate happening in Studio 45, the last time they had a debate there, which is kind of interesting because in academics, we use that debate to try to explain how we turn to style more than substance to necessarily evaluate candidates. When we got to the healthcare discussion, Tim Walz really was detailed in his understanding of the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, or otherwise known as Obamacare for many people listening. And he was able to articulate in and out what he thought it was able to do in terms of expanding access to healthcare. And when JD Vance really was asked about it, he just continued to beat the drum regarding that it wasn't working and that Donald Trump made it work better. And the particulars of that, which is so important to so many Americans, that was left a little bit murkier. So I think we've got to really be asking ourselves, when we evaluate this debate, did some of those policy answers become clearer? And did we like what those policy answers are?
Tara, don't be alarmed. I'm about to start recording the Zoom because I know that they're going to want to, use it perhaps for the morning newscast tomorrow morning when we're breaking this down. Mandy says Walz is standing next to a woman who will fight for our rights and for democracy. Trump will do the opposite. Lisa says Vance answered the questions while Walz danced around the question. The questions. Walz was honest, says Anthony. While we have DMS saying Vance was articulate and made me proud of his story. Interesting there because each candidate, we talked about it on the pre-debate stream, Tara. JD Vance opened up by saying, I don't think most of America knows who Tim and I are. And we noted that. I think most of America don't know who these two men are. Now they have a better idea. And so we got a little bit more information on their story. Much has been made of Vance's story, of course, from his book. Walz's story, of course, is growing up as a boy in Nebraska also was noted several times tonight. So getting just to know these candidates, I mean, the issues are highly, highly important and are going to take center stage. But I mean, the actual people delivering on these issues and really making promises on behalf of them and on behalf of their running mate, I think that their character has to come through tonight, and we got a better idea as to who each one of them are.
We did, and it goes back to what we started our discussion tonight about. The vice presidential debate is all about doing no harm, and both candidates, by sharing their stories, by humanizing themselves and aligning themselves with the American people, really gave a pathway to each of them. But it was really in the details of the debate that started to differentiate the two different Americas that they really saw. And one, of course, was that America was going down the wrong path, and that immigration was really at the core root of most of our problems, whether it be healthcare, whether it be housing, or whether it be gun violence. And then, of course, the opportunity economy, which really painted a much more optimistic view from the Harris-Walz campaign. And so although they shared their personal stories and made us really lean in to wanting to be closer to them, I think they also revealed that how they see America. And most voters really depend on that vision to really understand their character. And I think that's why tonight was important in terms of really understanding not just policy, but what kind of character do you want America to have in the next 4 years?
We've got Felicia here saying JD said what we wanted to hear. We want more affordable everything. We need utilities that we can afford. I can't afford rent and food for my family. I was impressed because he said what I wanted to hear. Felicia's here saying almost exactly what JD's closing statements was his closing remarks. John says Vance dominated the debate, while Ready for Just One says Walz won the debate hands down, right? I mean, people are going to see it differently, and it's probably going to come down to your political leanings at this stage. I would take my guess would be that a vast majority of Americans have already made up their mind on which candidate they're going to vote for. Let's bring that up, Tara. I mean, independents or undecided voters, which we talk about ad nauseum all the time, is really the target tonight. People that are in their respective camps and are locked in with their vote. Look, you're not going to change their mind unless something sudden and drastic happens at this stage in the election cycle, which is probably extraordinarily unlikely. So you're trying to win over people that are just kind of on the fence, trying to pick between the two potential options. And who do you think appealed more to independent voters, the down the middle undecideds tonight?
Well, I thought what both candidates did that was really well done is that they softened what their appearances had been previous to this. Certainly JD Vance was much more softer tonight than what we had seen in all of his previous discussions. I mean, we were really coming in to this debate seeing JD Vance pummel immigrants, especially in Ohio, and his discussion about the cats and dogs and those pieces. And it was unsavory. It was often people had laughing at the memes, but the undercurrent was ugly. And so tonight he really painted a much different picture. But Tim Walz came in as this folksy coach, and he really was able to, I think, position himself as a statesman and really clearly articulate very heavily detailed policy positions. And so, I think those undecided, those few and far between, they might have not only just been undecided on who they were going to vote for, they were really undecided if they're going to vote at all. And I think what tonight did for them is it said, listen, maybe I can have a vested interest. Maybe this isn't just some big, brawl between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. We've got two reasonable vice presidential candidates that both could possibly be president one day, and they're speaking in a very civil and respectful way, and they're talking about details of policy. And I think that makes those voters, not the undecided necessarily, but those that weren't going to vote at all, lean into the conversation and start listening.
How about, okay, we were talking about down the middle, maybe more in the middle of the political spectrum. How about Avery answering our call for something more down the middle, right? I'll read this comment. These comments are coming in on the really right underneath WFLA.com/poll. When you go to WFLA.com/poll, you can type in a comment. I'm sorry that I have to repeat myself. We have a revolving door of people coming into the live stream, so I have to say it every so often. The poll remains active on WFLA.com/poll. Avery says Walz was less articulate and had less of a punch to him when he says stuff and just says less and more time, is too quiet and mild-mannered. Vance slightly won due to being more concrete. It doesn't really matter. Harris won the presidential debate, and it was a very slight win for Vance. I say this as a centrist writing in. So Avery sees it as Vance winning tonight, but that Harris won the presidential debate, and so I don't know if you score that 1-1. I don't think one is equal to the other, but for what it's worth, there's Avery's comment, Tara.
Yeah, I think it's all about how we view the strength of a candidate. Do we view the strength of a candidate by their policy or by their style? And I think depending on where you lean as a person, that's how you're going to lean into the evaluation of this debate, because a lot of people are, posting on Facebook and X about the policy details that Tim Walz was able to articulate that JD Vance wasn't able to in a detailed way. And so I think that that's part of the piece. But, regarding the final statements and their closing statements of each of the candidates, when JD Vance won the virtual coin toss to go last, that was a really important win for the Trump Vance, because people remember the last thing that's being shared with them on these debates. And so when he was able to have the closing remarks,
the one that Felicia remembered. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really what's going to be left with people, because that's the last thing they tune into.
Let's go to Marie's comment, saying that Vance carried it until the final remarks. Will Trump accept the final count? Or if he loses, will there be another insurrection? I think that this is a concern of a lot of Americans, is election integrity, making sure that we get it 100% right. And then, of course, making sure that whomever loses accepts the result with grace and with humility. And so whether it's...
And follows the rule of law. I mean, that's
right.
What both Republicans and Democrats want. They want the rule of law to be applied. This is where I think that JD Vance really showed a little bit of a weakness. And the reason I say that is because he was quick to differentiate himself from Donald Trump as the debate went on, saying, well, I disagreed with him here, or all of us have a little bit of a different opinion here. But when Tim Walz looked at him and said, Donald Trump unequivocally lost the election, do you agree or disagree? That was another time that JD Vance wouldn't say whether he agreed or disagreed, and wouldn't align with understanding that January 6th, and there's thousands of prosecutions against the insurrectionists under federal law. wouldn't say, yes, those individuals trespassed and they violated the law, but those that were protesting peacefully, we should honor those, but prosecute those. That would have been a more centrist way of approaching that. And it would also have given many people a little bit more peace of mind that if Donald Trump loses the election, that J.D. Vance will stand with the rule of law. Instead, he let it sort of develop as more of a First Amendment censorship piece rather than one about assaulting the Capitol.
Preach says Vance was articulate because telling the truth doesn't make you nervous. That's the comment from Preach. Paul says that Walz was more knowledgeable. We've got, let's see, Marv Rice. J.D. Vance actually answered and articulated his message while Walz dodged a lot of questions and brought up things that have no impact on our country and its needs. Ashley says, I was rooting for Walz, but after the debate, I'm Team Vance/Trump now. Walz disappointed me with his views, while Vance impressed me. Very, very interesting to see a bit of a swing there with Ashley's comment.
Sure.
When I'm looking this way, folks, I'm reading your comments. No one's bringing these up on screen. I'm clicking through them and trying to get as much balance here as possible. But while we're talking about the idea of balancing the viewpoints here, our comment section is going to be representative of the results that you're seeing on screen. We can look now at the most recent tally, and we've eclipsed 15,000 votes on our unscientific online poll of who you thought won the vice presidential debate between J.D. Vance and Tim Walz. We will be collecting votes over the coming hours into the overnight hours for people that might be catching up on the debate. Again, it was on YouTube. It was all over the place, so there's going to be people that perhaps missed it. Maybe they were watching, the wild card round of Major League Baseball, or maybe they were watching a primetime show that they loved and they'll watch the debate later. We're going to leave the poll open so people can continue to vote on WFLA.com
JB,
/poll.
I want to just pop in real fast to the point that the last commenter brought in about
it just disappeared off my screen. I was about to click on it and bring it back. It's gone. Yeah.
No. And the concept was I was on the fence. I was rooting for Walz, and then I'm now Trump Vance team because he was much more articulate, and I was impressed by that. I think this goes to the idea that J.D. Vance is a Yale-trained lawyer, and he looks and sounds like one. And that's something that voters are impressed by. Tim Walz is a fourth grade teacher who then was a coach.
Yeah.
And so that plays into how voters are really responding. So that's part of this equation. But we've got to do what we saw these two vice presidential candidates do. And I was impressed by both of them tonight because they both tried to listen to one another and hear the details. Now, they disagreed on much, but they did it in such a way that they were first listening. And I'm hoping that we can move past, did J.D. Vance's suit look better than Tim Walz's? And was he, slicker in his response? And really look at what that policy will do for our country and for our families.
A live look at the spin room. You can see, if you've never seen this before, it is pretty wild to watch how everyone just descends upon this room in the aftermath of a debate. Elise Stefanik, a congresswoman from New York, there in support of J.D. Vance. You can see, I believe that's Donald Trump Jr. Harrison is there. Oh, Byron Donald from Florida back there as well, all doing interviews and trying to drum up support for their candidate. You ever been in the spin room before, Tara? We need to get you a press pass, get you in there one of these days.
Yeah, I'd love to do that. Actually, at the convention, Democratic National Convention, I was able to stand right next to it and got a coffee mug. But no, I have to tell you, I think that that's a real hot seat for candidates. And and in the last presidential debate, we heard that those that beeline right to the spin room are feeling like they want to control the narrative, and that's not always a great sign. So I think it's going to be interesting to hear the sort of national discussion about whether J.D. Vance was able to win the debate or not. But I really, really believe that this isn't going to change anyone's mind. I think that maybe you're one viewer, perhaps so, but when it comes down to voting on November 5th and in 5 weeks, there's going to be so much that can happen. 5 weeks is like 5 years in politics. And, it'll really depend on as the pressure builds, how both JD Vance and Tim Walz are able to handle it. Viewers need to remember that JD Vance is in a different position than Tim Walz. JD Vance is at the beginning of his political career. He very much is age-wise much more at a chance of becoming president, and has only served for 2 years in the U.S. Senate. And that might be something that's good for you because you think that he's not a seasoned politician, doesn't come with all of the burden of being in politics for 20 years and whatnot. Tim also brings a certain amount of experience that contradicts that, one in which he's able to bring institutional knowledge and being someone that's been able to bring bipartisan negotiations to fruition. So voters really have a tough decision here, but I do think that JD Vance is a little bit different of a candidate than Tim Walz because he's at the beginning of his career and he's coming in also as somebody who has a much older presidential candidate with him.
Let's see here. Jursic, I believe is how you would say it. Says Vance is very approachable and had an excellent debate. We're seeing a lot of that echoed throughout the comment section. Yeah, I know. I find it interesting that you're talking about focus on the issues versus how they are at public speaking, right, and orating. Their points. I couldn't help but wonder with both candidates at times over the course of the debate. I'm thinking about their responses, and I just think back to all the debate prep. I don't think that people truly understand how much debate prep these candidates do, and I believe that, for Walz, I remember seeing a report that Buttigieg stood in for Vance, and the amount of debate prep and the amount that is crammed into these two brains to try to deliver those zingers and deliver those promises to people and try to echo the campaigns of their respective running mates. I'm just thinking about how many different lines are being crammed in there. It's a lot to deliver in 90 minutes for both candidates. And, it'll be up to the American public to determine, who did a more effective job at just delivering the message tonight. But yeah, it's interesting because their styles were very, very different. I don't think anyone would really disagree that Vance was came in with poise and yes, brought his his Yale background was on full display tonight versus maybe perhaps the more humble beginnings of a Tim Walz was on more of a display tonight from his end, right? So
and JB, it all depends on what appeals to you. Like if you're a plain spoken person and you want, that sort of earnestness, I think Tim Walz appeals to you. If you want something a little more polished, then JD Vance might be something that you are attracted to, but it really needs to come down to policies. And I don't think that the details of those policies were necessarily equally delivered tonight. And that's why people need to do their homework and go to the platforms. But one of the things that really was encouraging to me as someone who teaches political science is that both of these candidates seem to really want to get to solutions. They weren't just looking at labeling the problems. And although they had much different views on how to get to the solutions, they both had an earnest and honest desire to get there, and they wanted to serve the American people. And I think everyone can leave the debate tonight thinking these are two men that really want to serve America.
Well, sometimes I think about what I will remember from a debate years from now, if I'll remember it at all. I can almost guarantee you that when I look back at this debate years from now, I'm going to remember, look, the word you used was bromance. I don't know if there was really a true bromance unfolding. Although, I mean, you look at the end of the debate and how they shook hands, and one, I forget who it was, but one put their arm on the other. It was clearly a sign of mutual respect. I think that we can share.
Yes.
And just clearly the moments of bipartisanship is something that I'm going to remember. The fact that there were some agreements on a debate stage. The whole point of a debate is that these two are supposed to be in contrast of one another and disagree. So any moments where, they look at each other and say, yeah, we agree on that, that people like in your living room, you're looking around, be like,
Well, that doesn't make great TV,
does
does
that,
it?
right?
Yeah.
The idea is that they're supposed to disagree. So moments where they agree, you just kind of shift in your seat at home and you're thinking, did I hear that right? Hey, mom, dad, did they just agree? And
Let's remember something though, JB, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but let's make sure that we remember something. This vice presidential debate was very important, but those that are going to be running this country are at the top of the ticket.
Right.
And so it's Donald Trump's rhetoric about Kamala Harris and his policies and what he will do once he's president. It's Kamala Harris's rhetoric and what she'll do as president that counts. And although this is important because these two candidates, Vance and Walz, may take the seat if that something happens to either one of them, if they're elected, this campaign is really about the top of the ticket and the character at the top of the ticket. And what was interesting tonight is I think we saw some of the best of the ticket out there, the best that they could offer. And I think that's important to note.
Folks, ask yourself, how much do you think Kamala Harris influenced the state of our country over the last 4 years? How much do you think that Mike Pence influenced the country over the course of his 4 years? Ask yourself about the influence that a vice president carries. Now, I think every administration is going to be different. Certain vice presidents are going to be more involved in the day-to-day activity of the ongoing administration than others. I think every administration, every White House, Tara, I think it's fair to say is different. But you bring a good point, bringing us back down to reality that these are vice presidential candidates. They're the number twos on the ticket. I think the reason I brought it up was just because this country is so starved in many respects for bipartisanship to get things done regardless of party, that there's some common sense things that can get accomplished. Things that have been Republican goals, Democratic goals for many, many years, things that, if we put our heads together, we can actually get some meaningful legislation done and make this country a better place. And to see just the slightest hint of bipartisanship, I think that created optimism, at least in our comment section here tonight, looking at it and thinking to yourself, hey, you know what? Maybe it's not always us against them in today's modern politics. Maybe there is a chance for even on some of the larger stages for there to be micro agreements in light of the macro disagreements.
I think you're 100% right. And I think that's why the comments tonight were really like, that was a great debate.
Right.
Regardless of who won, we talked ideas, we saw mutual respect, a little humor. I mean, at one point, J.D. Vance turned to Tim Walz when they were talking about Tim Walz's son who experienced gun violence at a community center and said, I'm so sorry that your son went through that.
That was one of the most heartfelt moments perhaps of the entire debate was Vance interrupting Walz's time just to say, sharing just a moment of, I hate that happened.
Yes. And I think another human moment that J.D. Vance softened his persona, that really he was coming into this debate sort of with this burden of the ugliness of the Haitian immigration issues when he talked about his children in the closing remarks. And also when he talked about his second grader going to school and his eyes lit up and it sort of, people could identify with him. But the problem is that on a debate stage, you can be performative like that. And what as voters we need to do is tie that performance with real policies. And I know I'm beating this drum and I just want everyone to be listening though, because somebody can sell you anything. It's whether they deliver the product. And so I just want us to be looking at Tim Walz and J.D. Vance as vice presidential candidates and is their ticket going to deliver on what they're talking about? If you're really pro-family, what does that look like? And what does that policy look like? And if you're really wanting to deal with the immigration issue, what does that policy really look like? And so, I do think on the terms of the immigration policy debate, which J.D. Vance did a great job tying to Harris and Walz did a great job beating the drum back, saying, hey, she delivered a bipartisan piece of legislation that would have addressed many of these issues. And your boss, Donald Trump, killed it for political reasons. And I think that that was important to be said, whether people could hear it or not. That's a big centerpiece of the Trump-Vance campaign. And Walz did a really good job making sure that people knew that his boss, Kamala Harris, delivered on the promise, and that the problems that we're having at the border could have been solved before the election season.
Wendy says Vance won the debate, but best actual debate in years. Wish they were the two primary candidates. Well, Wendy, I'll tell you that there is no scenario where they become the primary candidate. That's the first comment I have seen. But I think that people are.
Wendy's really optimistic.
That's some real optimism there. But yeah, I mean, these are the types of comments that we're getting from real people who watched this, watched the debate tonight and shared their thoughts with us. We'll get to just a couple more. We'll go to Michael here. Governor Walz was outstanding. I like the way he addressed the child care and abortion acts. I also like the way he narrowed down the substances of housing, something I feel Donald Trump and Senator Vance are slacking on within the building of homes and housing. We've got Rose here. This debate was a lot better than the Trump/Harris one. Kind of wish these men were running for president instead. Wow, that's twice. That's two now. But Vance seems better at communicating answers than Walz. Right. One is, according to our commenters, and yes, this is a recurring theme with our commenters, people who are saying that Vance was able to get his message across more effectively tonight. But what Tara, our WFLA political analyst of St. Petersburg College, is repeating, back to people is that while a candidate might be able to deliver a message better than the others, it's really comes down. Policy is what rules a political fight, and whether or not you should vote on a person should come down to policy is what Tara has been saying.
So let's bring this back to one of the big issues in Florida. And of course, that's Amendment number 4, and that is the enshrining the right to choose in the state of Florida Constitution. And we know that the polling in Florida shows that both men and women, Republican and Democrats, are overwhelmingly supporting the right to enshrine a woman's right to choose. And if you take that barometer and tie it to Walz's comments tonight, where he, masterfully delivered, whether you like him or not, you have to give him credit for this, masterfully delivered saying, we trust doctors, we trust women, we are pro-women. That was very clear, and that will resonate with Florida voters who have to vote on Amendment 4 this fall. And he made that very clear. And so regardless of any other issue tonight, that was probably the most effective message that he could give in the entire debate.
Tara, we're going to begin to wrap up the live stream here momentarily. Just a couple more minutes for people to get in their comments and get in their votes. We're not closing the poll, and we're not calling the poll for one candidate or the other, though I will say, and we'll read Poor Boy's comment, and then we'll put away his comments so we can see the live results. Poor Boy says, I think Vance was more positive in the direction our country needs to move, while Walz was not definitive enough in his answers. Also, Walz was tripping over his words of explanation, while Vance was very confident in his choice of words for his answers. Again, a recurring theme we've seen in our comment section. Thank you for the comment. These numbers are really starting to solidify, and we've got, I believe we're approaching 20,000 votes on WFLA.com/poll.
Wow.
And we're getting closer to 20,000 right now. And JD Vance holding firm at 63%, Tim Walz at 37%. These numbers on the live stream on the right side of your screen are live. So if there were to be a sudden surge for Walz or a sudden surge for Vance, you would see the numbers change. But we've been on 63-37 right now for a long time. And I'll tell you, the Harris-Trump poll that we ran that night was significantly closer. So more people tonight are seeing this for Vance than for Walz, though, again, this is an unscientific online poll. I think that there's still value to this poll, of course, not done
I
scientifically,
do too.
but it is interesting to see these comments support the poll results as well.
It does, and I think Tim Walz, if he were able to use this to inform his messaging, he did not get in front of the cameras like JD Vance has for the last month. He has really been behind the scenes, and perhaps all of that media uh, interaction really readied JD Vance for the debate. Certainly, his Yale Law School training did, but I think this is going to really, if this kind of poll is repeated on the national level, then I think Tim Walz has a lot of work to do in terms of making sure that his message comes out in a way that people can hear it. I think it's definitely a style piece, though, because coming from the Midwest, he was someone that sounded very direct, very clear. But again, that's how I've been trained and grew up in Michigan, hearing someone speak. So I think it really has a lot to do with regional and geographic communication styles. But listen, this is a good instructive survey and survey results for the Harris Walz campaign to say, listen, the comments all have been about style, not necessarily policy. So if they can improve their style in terms of delivering their message just a little bit, it will really result in a razor thin tight election. And so that could be the takeaway, is to refine and distill how they deliver their message, move a little bit away from that folksy down to earth kind of piece to something a little more sophisticated, and then maybe more voters can hear their message.
Now, to be fair, there have been pro Vance comments tonight that do point out his policy points that were articulated tonight, and not just about style. So again, talking about style versus substance.
Thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah,
Yes.
no. So, but style is certainly earning Vance a lot of points tonight, but also there are a lot of commenters, I think, in our comment section that are saying that he did deliver on substance and echoed the rallying cries that have been pointed out by or shared by Donald Trump for many months, if not years. Let's go to Nadia. Walz seems like the guy next door who would run out to help you in a crisis, is the comment there. Andrew Thompson says, although I am a registered Democrat, J.D. Vance won. His story is inspiring, and he had amazing points on trade, energy, and immigration. There's a perfect example that people are pointing out certain things that Vance really highlighted tonight that echoed with them specifically.
Thank you, Andrew. That's helpful. That's good feedback for us to be reminded of that. Thank you.
Let's see. Citizen 95. It was great to see both candidates find an equal ground on certain issues, but J.D. Vance connected more on the most important issues that we have as American citizens. This is a very articulate comment. I'm just going to note that this comment is very representative of what we're seeing in our comment section. Perhaps that's the best way to describe it.
And I think that that's fair. I think that voters are looking for a candidate that represent their lives and what they want to see in the future before them. I just think that there are two types of voters, and we know that. There's a voter that really sees the narrated story of America through J.D. Vance and Donald Trump's eyes, and then there's one that sees it through Kamala Harris and Tim Walz's eyes. And tonight, I think from your poll, J.D. Vance seems to have made his vision much more clear to many of your viewers. So he just did a better job telling the story that Trump and Vance want to tell about America. I do hope that the Harris and Walz campaign can tell their story too in a way that America can hear, so that we're making a really good informed decision.
It's all about understanding where all the candidates stand on their respective issues and making the most informed vote for you, your family, and what you think the future of America ought to be. I think that tonight we really did. I don't think that there's any opinion here that I am sharing other than we did have a very intellectual debate. I actually
We
thought that
did.
we
It was
did.
great.
It was interesting, and it was fascinating to watch certain strategies, get deployed, and it was interesting to see the contrast and how they countered on certain points. We haven't really talked very much about how CBS did and how the moderators did tonight. I think that comment or the comment section is already filled with various opinions about how CBS News did tonight. We'll kind of that we're focused more on the candidates and the issues really tonight anyway. But Tara, I'm just going to share that I thought that this was a very fascinating debate, one where we really did get some insight on the issues for these respective tickets. I'll leave the floor with you, your final thoughts on what you thought of the debate tonight and what you think people should take away from it.
Tonight was a great example of a vice presidential debate that did no harm. Both candidates came through for their presidential candidates, and they certainly told their story of how each party sees the country and painted a vision for the next 4 years. I think every single voter needs to go home and look at the issues and how those issues align with their vision for their families, and then vote accordingly. Of course, October 7th, which is just 1 week from today, is the last day to register to vote in the state of Florida. And so we need to get out our nonpartisan voter registration guides, make sure that we have a voter ready plan. And tonight's debate really left us with these two stories of America. One that JD Vance gave us, which is that immigration is at the core of many of our problems, whether it be housing, gun violence, healthcare issues, affordability, inflation, and then, of course, Tim Walz's vision of an opportunity economy where we have solutions to complex problems and we can paint a new America forward. And I think voters are really leaning into both candidates and really hoping that they can deliver for their own families.
Tara Newsom, WFLA's political analyst, you see here on air and, of course, on stream with me as part of your local election headquarters. Of course, a doctor at just doing it all the time, Tara, at St. Petersburg College and helping us out. We really appreciate your time tonight.
I'm always happy to spend time with you, JB. Thanks so much.
All right, everybody. Your local election headquarters, of course, is WFLA.com. You can continue to cast your vote, share comments as well on WFLA.com/poll. We have, of course, stories, multiple articles posted about the Vance Walz debate tonight. And, of course, we'll continue to monitor the poll into tomorrow as more and more people cast their vote. But it would appear that so far tonight, J.D. Vance earning more votes and earning the victory in the minds of a majority of our audience members joining us on your local election headquarters. Again, the very latest on WFLA.com. For Tara Newsom, I'm J.B. Biunno. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Election Day, 5 weeks away. We'll see you soon.